So 7 or 8 months ago, I joined the club. I got one of these Alpha TIG 200 TIG welders, like most other people here on YouTube have. The work I've been doing with it has mostly just been practice. I've been trying all sorts of different types of welds, different positions, different materials, things of that nature. I haven't gotten to a really good point yet, but I have gotten a lot better since my very first attempts. This means, however, though, that I'm dipping the tungsten a lot. I'm having to resharpen them constantly, and as you can see, this kind of creates a real traumatic situation for my grinding wheel. I know. So let's fix that. All of the cheap store suspects sell these diamond grinding wheel kits really cheap, and I'd like to just take whatever I have laying around and adapt that into making a grinder specifically for tungstens. Luckily, I have this big dryer motor from an old GE dryer. I don't know how old it is, but it's old. And what I'd like to do is just take whatever I've got laying around in my shop and just slap it together and see if we can't make something. We've got to get the ID of about 1/4 of an inch onto the OD of this, and that's 1/2 an inch. Luckily, I've got a machine shop. This is 3/4 of an inch 4140 steel, so let's go ahead and put the hole in it for a 1/2 inch bore. After center drilling, I'm actually drilling to 31/64. That's just under 1/2 an inch, and that's so that I can finish the bore with a boring bar, giving us a very accurate hole to fit over the shaft of the motor. And then we can just part it right off. Okay, it's actually driving me nuts sitting here editing this. I flipped the part around. We'd already basically cut a perfect bore that was nice and round and concentric to the axis of the lathe, but we're using a 3-jaw chuck here, and I flipped the part around, and the 3-jaw chuck is now grabbing it on the outside, the rough finish of that part, which is problematic for a number of reasons. The outside forge finish of this piece of metal isn't necessarily going to be perfectly round. The 3-jaw chuck isn't going to grab it in the same spot, so we could be eccentric between that bore we just cut and the outside of the part, which means the new feature that we're machining may not be perfectly in the same axis. And that can be a real problem. I kind of thought about this in the moment when I was machining it, but you know, it's just something that for whatever reason I let go. And ultimately, it didn't become a problem, but this is something I do want to point out to you, that this can be a real big point of inaccuracy when you're doing a simple machining task. One way to have done it better would be to make a mandrel out of anything, probably aluminum would have been the easiest, that had that perfect, to cut it right on the lathe and keep it in the chuck, keep the fixturing the exact same without changing it, and to cut a diameter that fit inside of that hole perfectly, and then use super glue. Yes, the super glue arbor maneuver, and I love it. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out, and back to the project. The task at hand now is to form a small boss that matches the hole in the diamond grinding wheel as perfect as possible. I'm measuring often, as any looseness will result in a lot of vibrations and a poor grind. The boss is then drilled and tapped for the bolt which will hold the grinding wheel against the adapter arbor. Sometimes it's really nice when you can just pull a broken tap right out of the hole it broke in with nothing more than a wrench.
And you know, sometimes it feels great just to get across the finish line no matter what position you finished in. The motor didn't have a keyway in it, it just had a flat for set screws, so I cross-drilled and threaded a couple of holes for a couple of small grub screws just to secure this little adapter in place. It's far easier than if I had to broach a keyway, in my opinion. And the first plug-in saw some success, and that's always a good thing. I had only wired this up for a basic lamp cord, so I upgraded the motor's wiring to have an on-off switch as well as a grounded cable. This is both for safety and convenience's sake. For lack of a more elegant solution, I ended up just gluing the light switch box onto the motor's body with just some simple 5-minute epoxy, which has so far worked really well. The last feature needed in this little basic build is some manner of tool rest, which I decided I would use a leftover rest from my grinder for. I basically drilled and tapped into the motor's mount, and then I was able to just bolt on this rest, and it is actually a pretty straightforward little solution. I fouled in a little bit of a notch for TIG tungstens to index on, sort of, which would help keep everything kind of in line. And you know what? I'll be damned if it doesn't work. This actually kind of surprised me how well it worked. It doesn't spin as fast as a normal grinder, so it takes a little bit longer. It doesn't really throw a lot of hot sparks. But we got a tip, a real clean one, too, in my opinion. Well, this definitely isn't the most elegant solution, but it is an inexpensive and convenient one. You know, it really allows me to continue practicing my TIG welding without sacrificing my grinder's wheel, and it actually makes it a little bit faster to sharpen up the tungstens. You know, at this point, basically speaking, I'll take all the help I can get. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.